certain amount based on that. So look at it that way. The other thing is what she was referring to in terms of removing that equity and buying that equity back. Pay attention, because if they don't meet your values, if they're not contributing to the team, but they're only advising, then getting that equity back is hard. It's very hard, and there's ways of doing it. I've Pay attention, because if they don't meet your values, if they're not contributing to the team, but they're only advising, then getting that equity back is hard. It's very hard, and there's ways of doing it. I've Pay attention, because if they don't meet your values, if they're not contributing to the team, but they're only advising, then getting that equity back is hard.
But for anyone that's not a founding member of those, 2 to 5, everyone else should be on a vesting schedule. And if they, if that's a 1-year clip, then and they leave in that year, then they don't get any of that. So just make sure you consult your team on that. But I won't spend too much time because I feel like I'm not talking member of those. Network is a really great place. Tap people with more. You see AngelList. This is the plug. AngelList is the largest marketplace for startup talent, and you will find a lot of smart people there. Network is a really great place. And I see startup posting out here all the time. The other really great way to do this is if you do get seed or angel round, that connection of people will also have other groups in their network that they'll recommend. And depending on what stage of funding and what company, they might even have someone. I remember we actually declined funding for a group because they said, if you take this, we actually require you to take this person on as like, I don't know, a secret product. You're not going to insert someone in a company. But, so some companies will actually have people they have in their network that will help you if that's something that you want. But yeah, but other than that, Angel. So some companies will actually have people they want. They have a network that will help you. That's but yeah, other than that, that all, like, let's say a CTO has, and then put that into a questionnaire or template and ask those questions. Andy said, smarter people are doing this. We're just kind of reusing material that's already put out there by the founders that have come before us. So just make sure you have some fair process, and that obviously is going to minimize bias too. We all have subconscious bias. We all are going to work on that. That could be confirmation bias, where if somebody acts like us or sounds like us or compliments us, all of a sudden we have a positive affirmation of them, even if they don't even have anything to do with what we need them to do. All of a sudden we have this feeling of like, oh, it'd be great on the team. But that could be confirmation bias, where if somebody acts like us or sounds like us or compliments us, all of a sudden we have a positive affirmation of them, even if they don't even have anything to do with what we need them to do. All of a sudden we have this feeling of like, oh, it'd be great on the team. Has to be measured. So that's
something that struck me just now too is that you hear someone echoing back to you don't want another finger. You want people to not always agree. So it's important that we have healthy conflict. You get through, you hear someone. Healthy conflict allows you to make the right choices that you want to. Yes. I know that your thought. Remember, self-awareness is your type of person who likes dominance. You need to learn to back off and let so important, and why the values that you put in play and hiring and firing them on that is so important. Okay.
So can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is that you guys need to get a cadence in play. Like if it's co-founders or if it's team, you have to have if it's a daily stand-up or if it's a weekly 1 hour. Hey, we right now we do a 1 win, 1 loss, and then the must deliverable for next week. Every single Friday I do that. And so you've got to get in a regular cadence, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, we do weekly cadence actually. So follow up to that is maybe he's a bad core team member, but maybe someone who, when we do have enough money to pay a salary, he would be a great person to show up and knock some stuff out. Maybe you bring him back later.
It's possible. It's a possibility. I would say look at it this way: you come back and you bring him in later, and he's a paid salary. You might also want to have as an advisor if he's that intelligent. You don't know. It depends on what his expertise is. An advisor can be very useful. Someone you can reach out to and say, "What are your thoughts on this?" And they're not delivering on a daily basis. They're giving you advice. An advisor doesn't necessarily have to do the work. They need to tell you, and you can ask them, "Can you do that for us?" Another way of doing equity is based on a milestone. So you don't always have to do it based on time. It can be based on achieving a result. So that's another option for you. If he never achieves that result, he doesn't get anything.
Yeah.
So there's several ways in which to look at that.
Do you think, and the other thing is, do you think he'll feel relieved or do you think he'll feel upset by maybe now is not the right time to be a part of your project?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a very good question.
I think that he'll feel upset, but I think he'll feel upset. I think he'll feel disappointed in himself, but he might actually be relieved. So
right now, but that's the conversation you need to have with him.
Yeah,
honestly.
There was an awesome interview with Jeff. Was it Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn? I know he just stepped down. 14 years of LinkedIn with Oprah, and I think it was, I don't know, one of her interviews, and he said, the best thing I learned in my career is when to be a compassionate leader, and a compassionate leader knows when to take the pitcher out of the game because their arm is tired. And I was like, that was awesome, you're so right. Like, you know, the worst thing is having your buddy drown because he's freaking out, he can't manage it, he's missing deadlines and COVID and all this stuff, and you're not a good leader for that. You know, you have to manage that, and you have to decide, like, hey, I'm going to sit him on the bench right now, but I'm going to bring him off the bench when his arm heals, or whatever that looks like for you. But I remember hearing that, and leadership is not only when to hire, but leadership is knowing when to take the pitcher out, you know? So.
Good word, yeah. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it's tough.
Hey, can I ask this on behalf of everybody? As a quick question.
Before we go there, I want to finish up one last thing. Something she said in combination. Think of if you think you want to bring him back, and it's just this timing is not right, and you can still leave something in the cap table as a goal down the line, so that when things come back, he can still be on that cap table, but that milestone's not hit. And if someone fills in that milestone, you make a new milestone for him. So that's something that you need to think about if you want to adjust a little bit and you want to keep him around. But everybody on the team needs to agree that that's what we want to do. Okay? You don't want to do that on your own. You want to make sure your team agrees, yes, that's a good way. And don't force the issue. Bring and say, what do y'all think of this? And make sure they are honest with you, because if they don't buy into it, then you have to part ways. If the team's, they're done with it, they're done with it. Okay? Because you don't want to create animosity on your team either. Okay? All right.
I was going to ask you a quick question, which is probably a good thing for most of the founders here. What do you all think of vesting while working part-time? on the startup.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you
What do I-
invest when you're working?
Sweat.
If you're working part time on a company, I expect that you're going to be. There's an advisor out there slash another of a company and here in town that is very successful. He and I are on the same page. I think most founders are working part time, and they're working a full time gig. And if you're not, then you're probably hurting yourself because you're going to hurt yourself in terms of financial situation for yourself. You don't want to go at the end of this term when things just don't go well and you have nothing. So you've got to be able to move through it. It's kind of like when I went to school, I worked my way through school. Do I appreciate what I did? Yes. Do I have value in what I believe in? Yes. Am I a strong UT fan? Yes, because I suffered through that process. The same thing is going to happen as a founder of a company. I suffered through this because I worked both ends of the canvas. And it's so important that you are going to invest during that time frame as you work part-time on the company that you're building. And when it can finally pay for itself is when you can finally start taking in your own salary.
And
Living Sense is doing that going well.
I think you just need to have expectations set. The one thing you don't want is to not ever talk about it. Everybody should be on the same page. Everybody should know what everybody's doing. If it's part-time or full-time or vesting, everybody should be aware. The last thing you want is like hushed whispers on a small team of less than 5. Like that does not fly. So just set expectations with yourself. If that's okay, if that's not okay, and then let it be known.
And do not play games. Don't play games. Be upfront and real.
And I will also echo that it is incredibly financially painful unless you have a lot of savings and you've prepared for this to completely jump from your full-time gig into your startup. I did that. I did not take a salary for a year. I did not take any expenses for a year. I paid all my own stuff, and it was very stressful. And that's additional stress where it's like if I had just stayed on my gig a little bit longer, maybe I would have been able to focus even less time but more energy because I wouldn't have been worried about how am I going to pay my bills. And so there is something to be said for that, right? So
yes, and that's kind of what I'm doing. Like I'm thinking about down the line, if we're profitable, I'm going to walk away from my job.
Yep.
For me, I work in college athletics. My business is in college athletics. So the relationships and everything that I'm doing are valuable to me.
Yeah.
You know, I work for Texas A&M Athletics. So with that, I have access to a lot of different people, and with my sports program, access to a lot of people in sports. So for me, I'm kind of taking it this way. But people have asked me like, hey, are you going to quit your job? And I'm just like, no, but people kind of look at me like that's something I need to do. And I don't know. I'm honestly confused because some people say, well, you're not that dedicated to your company if you're not quitting your job. And I'm just like, I don't know.
No. Let me just say something. If you've got a job, it's important to understand something. And I just lived this recently with someone, or I dealt with it. If you don't have income, you can become very desperate. And desperate people do desperate things, and they will drop their values. It's important to understand that. So now that's a test, but I would say don't do that. Make sure you can live without having to worry about that and live by your values instead. It's hard to go days without eating. It's just painful.
yeah, and let's look at all the major founder stories. Okay, who's the girl that did Spanx, right? Her founder story is like, for the first 2 years I had a job and I would come home and I would pack up the pantyhose in the middle of the night. But that was like 2 years. Let's look at the girl Ty Haney here in Austin. You know, she was the co-founder and founder of Outdoor Voices. For the first 2.5 years, she had a full-time job while she was going to all the events, meeting vendors, you know, sketching out all of her athletic wear design. She had a full-time job for 2.5 years. So there's nothing to be ashamed of for starting to prototype and get your idea off the ground and building your MVP while you still have a job. I think it's just, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with it at all.
Yeah, I haven't heard many founder stories where they were like, Yeah, most of them, most founder stories I hear are like, and I did this, and then it finally took off, and then that's pretty typical. And look, you're doing this right now. You're dedicated. You're sitting here for several hours. You're going through a high intensity boot camp around this. Like, that's a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of dedication you're putting towards this. Like, you obviously are motivated to do that. You're taking the right steps. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Yeah, what are y'all's thoughts on fundraising as a founder who's not on it full time? So I came with my company. I did it for a year and a half while working, and then got fired from a day job. It was just like, all right, well, they burned my boats for me. I'm not gonna work for anyone again after this.
I remember that story.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Andy's heard my story. So, like, I've always told entrepreneurs it's really hard to ask someone for their full-time money when you're working part-time by their definition. And I think plenty of founders work 9 to 5, and then they work 5 to 12, and then they work weekends. So I think 40 hours plus is done. What are y'all's thoughts on raising capital with your full-time job?
I think you hit the nail right on the head. People are absolutely going to want that. And the other thing too is that when you the first time you take someone's money, they are now an owner in your company. They are a decision maker in your company. They are someone that you got to keep investor updated in your company, and that is constant. And so they're not just going to give you money and be like, okay, let me know what you think, and like you're from no. So as soon as you decide to take that, it is much more work just making sure that they feel comfortable and confident as your investor that they've put their money in a safe moving business. So I think you're right. I think no one is going to give you a significant amount. I'd say significant. Now, if you raise a friends and family round, let's say pre-seed, and up to $200,000, and your aunt and your uncle each give you $5,000, okay, that's very different, and you can probably do that while. But I think once you start to go institutional or seed or institutional angel, and it's over that threshold of like maybe over $200,000, then yes, I think you're absolutely right. You're going to want to dedicate it full time. It's a whole different process. It's
yes.
And so yeah, I would agree with you. You're not going to get institutional money with doing it part time.
And I have a follow up on that. So if you can bootstrap your company and you're outsourcing and you have the product and you don't have to take on an investor, like, does there come a time, do you think, that someone who can bootstrap should take on an investor?
So that's you have to look at the growth curve, because your investors are going to help your growth curve. If you don't care about how long it's going to take you to grow your company, then bootstrap it. If you want to grow it fast and hit the market, because it's a market thing, then by God, you're going to need investors to help it drive, because you need the money to do sales, marketing, and get the product out the door, et cetera, et cetera. So it all depends on what your growth curve that you're looking for. Okay, if you can do it slow and you can do it bootstrap, go for it. But if you need to get this thing going and going in a hurry to beat everybody else, you have to take on investment.
Yeah,
I think it's also timing. Like, it may be that your first product like makes you profitable and is good for you for a short amount of time, and then you want to go into something else. Like maybe it's a physical product and you need more cash to invest. Then you can take on funding. You don't have to take it on from the beginning. It depends on what your strategy is.
That's exactly right. In fact, that's how a lot of companies, that's why they IPO twice, go private, come back. They do all kinds of things because that's how they have a strategy around that. If you look at Dell, they had to go from a perceived view of who they were. So they went from public to private, and then they changed the perceived view and they went public again so they could invest in where they were heading. I know it sounds strange, but that's what happens. And it happens at the big companies and it happens at the small companies. Joe's laughing at me.
Sorry, the group are passing notes back and forth in the chat. I'm laughing at the chat.
Yeah, he's laughing at me because you guys repeated the same challenges that he was throwing at us in our working group meeting. So Joe, exactly. That's why you're the president.
Good questions though, guys. I hope it's helpful and not just totally off base.
Yeah, I mean, it all definitely, makes sense. I mean, strategically, I mean, I think that's how I'm wired working in college athletics more. So you look at strategic goals, you look at things like this. So like my hiring process right now is like, I don't really need anything. If I go to hire someone, I'm going to hire a CTO, but I am putting my advisors together. And my advisors, I was strategic in how I did that, where I had one guy who I know who worked in, in branding and worked in for a professional sports team and partnerships. He has connections and he has relationships. He understands sales. So bring him on board, let him invest and let him build up, and then give him equity in my other company that ties into College Emojis. And then with another advisor I had, he actually built a successful emoji company based around sponsorships with animated emoji. And he has partners and a lot of like Gatorade, Lids, all those people lined up. So for me, bringing them into my company, especially Sports Mania, I kind of eliminate my competitors, but I'm also able to corner the market too, because I bring my collegiate licenses to his pro sport licenses, and we're able to kind of build this big thing together while also having vested interest in each other's companies.
Yeah.
Yep. So let me ask a question. We've used the word strategy a lot. A lot of people don't realize what strategy is versus a plan. Can someone define what the difference is?
I'm trying to think how I can articulate this.
No one volunteers, I will.
So
A strat.
this may
go
be
ahead.
wrong, but for me, when I think of a plan, I think of a set plan. You have it tied out to you're going to get from point A, B to C. But when I think of strategy, I think of moving parts that are actually going to get you to that solution. And it may not make you go through A, B, and C. You may can find a strategy that can get you from A to C and skip over B. So that's what I look at when I think of strategy versus a plan.
Yeah, it's a framework to build a plan. It's a framework that gives you guidelines on how to build that plan. It's how I want to define, here are my objectives at the high level and what I want to do. So the strategy defines the framework in which I will build the plan from. The plan is going to have milestones and timelines associated with it. It's really the execution of the strategy, right? That's what the plan is. The strategy is the framework. The execution is the plan. Does that make sense? So a lot of people don't know that, and so they'll talk interchangeably. I want to make sure you all understand it, because you're going to end up talking about strategy and you may end up doing the wrong thing, and it looks bad when you talk to investing. Make sense? Okay. I'm gonna switch out my iPods, my AirPods.
Yeah, the AirPods don't seem to last a whole session.
No.
Well, I know we're getting close to time anyways. I want to make sure that any other questions y'all have for us around hiring, recruitment.
And we're always like, and these mentors as well are available to you after this session. I had someone reach out from one of the earlier cohorts a few weeks ago to walk them through a leadership communication issue they were having. So like, we are here for you guys, whether you're in the program or not. We will find you. All right, y'all. I will take your silence as you are ready to go to the bar. Martine, will you walk us there, man? Ooh, what do you have, Tracy?
Oh, Martine's in the bar.